Hello and welcome to Pock and Rob. In this video I am turning to the subject of Bob Dylan. This is the first time that I've really focused on the voice of a generation of the 60s, and I'm going to rank my top 20 Bob Dylan albums. Now, I'm not a major Bob Dylan fan, my cousin really was, and actually it was my cousin that introduced me to Bob Dylan when I was 15 or so, when he gave me his spare copy of Blonde on Blonde. I'm not doing a ranking of all of his albums because, quite frankly, I can't be really bothered to listen to the cover albums from the 2010s. Christmas in the Heart, it's not on my list. And for the want of a better phrase, crappy albums from the mid-80s. I am just going to focus on the 20 ones that I have listened to, have enjoyed, and consequently have ranked. Before I go in and do my ranking, I would remind you to subscribe if you've not already done so, to hit the thumbs up to like the video, the bell to receive notifications of future content, and the share button to share this video with someone who may well like it. And let's go in with number 20, often towards the bottom of these rankings of Dylan albums, but I rather like it. It's Saved from 1980. This is the middle part of his Christian trilogy, and it is the weakest of the three, so spoilers, the other two will be coming up. But I'm a born-again Christian, so I'm predisposed to actually quite like this album. And for me, the opening three tracks of Satisfied Mind, Saved, which, by the way, I do think Third Day did a phenomenal cover of, and Covenant Woman, they're kind of worth the admission price of the album. But even mentioning tracks like Solid Rock and In the Garden, Saved, I enjoy it when I put it on, and that's better than many other Dylan albums that I don't enjoy when I put them on. Saved at number 20. And speaking of albums that I don't always have a good time when I put them on, is my number 19. And this nearly didn't make it onto the list, mainly because the last track leaves me stone cold. This is Rough and Rowdy Ways from 2020. So False Prophet is great. I like I Contain Multitudes. And there's some really good late songs. I mean, his voice is shot. It was never great to begin with. And then we get to side 4 of the record, which is entirely devoted to a song called Murder Most Foul, about the assassination of Kennedy. I've read reviews that said that people like Elvis Costello thought it was the best track that he'd ever recorded and they cried when they heard it. I listened to it and I was bored. But Rough and Rowdy Ways, there's enough on it to sneak it in at number 19. At number 18, an album, the only album he recorded with somebody else and was credited as such. It's Bob Dylan and the band's Planet Waves. And it's the fact that I really like the band that gets Planet Waves its placing at my number 18. Because actually, I can't tell you anything that's on it. I just know that when I listen to it, I'm going to be captured by the melodicism provided by the band alongside Bob's lyrics. Planet Waves, number 18. Number 17, an album that's on here for the case of one particular song. This is New Morning from 1970, and the track is If Not For You, although I massively prefer George Harrison's version on All Things Must Pass. It's fine. I did debate about whether or not to kind of cull this down to 15, but I realised that there's still great stuff on not wonderful albums like New Morning. At number 16, it's an album from the 1960s. It's The Times They Are A-Changin'. Massively overshadowed by its title track. But I do like Boots of Spanish Leather. I do like With God on Our Side. I do like the Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll. And it is often cited that this is his last protest album. It's my number 16. Into the top 15 now. And I do think there is great stuff and a great listening experience on every single one of these albums. Number 15, Nashville Skyline from 1969. First off, we have The Girl from the North Country, a duet with Johnny Cash. There is an affected vocal performance throughout this album where Bob is doing a slightly lower country voice, and I think it really suits him. I'd argue that this might be his best sung album in his entire catalogue. On here as well, you've got Lay Lady Lay, you've got an instrumental, which is a relative rarity in Bob's catalogue, so that is Nashville Rag. It's really enjoyable. Tonight I'll Be Staying With You closes the album, and I think, and I'm sure people will correct me if I'm wrong, as far as studio albums go, this is his shortest. It by no means overstays its welcome at any point, and actually kind of leaves you wanting a little bit more, which leads on to the New Morning album, where he kind of continued that vein he was in a little. Nashville Skyline, 15. At number 14, this has already been spoiled that it was definitely going to be coming. It's the third of the trilogy, it's Shot of Love. It's a good record. The title track, Lenny Bruce, is a great song as well. Property of Jesus and Every Grain of Sand are really good. The best track was left off it, and that, to me, was going to be The Groom Still Waiting at the Altar. It didn't make it onto Shot of Love, and perhaps if it had, I think Shot of Love would have been held in much higher regard. Number 14. Number 13. Hailed as a return to form after a pretty poor studio album called Under the Red Sky, and then two folky cover records, Good As I've Been to You and World Gone Wrong. Time Out of Mind from 97. It's taken me a while. So I owned this on CD when it first came out, and I just didn't really get it. Obviously, I now own it on a vinyl, and it's a late era classic. I don't think it's a masterpiece like some people do. I know Q magazine, when they did a whole retrospective thing, gave this a 5 stars, and I don't think it's quite that. But it does have Not Dark Yet and Trying to Get to Heaven, which is just fantastic. Bob had apparently had some health issues before this album came out, and he's kind of facing mortality. The fact is, this is coming up, however, for 30 years old. So he may have been considering his mortality, but he'd got he's still going, a lot more life still left in him. But Time Out of Mind, best track on here is Make You Feel My Love. Now, that was savaged on its release as being simple. It ain't simple. And actually, it's yet another example, late on in his career, of great Dylan songs that other people interpret as even better. And I'm, of course, referring to Adele's version of Make You Feel My Love from 19. Beautiful. Wonderful song, and worth the admission on Time Out of Mind. Number 12 is another album that it's taken me a long time to appreciate fully. It's Desire from 1976, I believe. The good on here is great. I like Hurricane. It's just a great protest song. I love the closer, Sarah, and his heart cry to the crumbling marriage and his wife. In between is stuff like Mozambique, One More Cup of Coffee, Romance in Durango, Black Diamond Bay, which is just great, but there's Joey. And Joey's the reason it's taken me a long time to like Desire. I don't like Joey. I still think the glamorization of a gangster and the lyrics of What Made Them Have to Blow You Away is embarrassingly bad. A co-write with Jacques Levy, and it stinks up the album. Desire could be way higher were it not for a piece of turd like Joey. My number 12. Number 11. I recently got this at a record fair for a bargain, 15 quid. I was well chuffed, and I think it's a 2012 original. It's Tempest. Duquesne Whistle that opens the record. I could listen to that all day. It's just an absolutely great song, and that is worth the admission for Tempest. But I also like Roll On John, the tribute to Lennon. And it's a solid record without ever being truly remarkable, with the exception of Duquesne Whistle. My number 11. And we're into the top 10. And these are all top draw records. So at number 10, the Freewheelin Bob Dylan, his second record from 1963. So an album that contains Blowin' in the Wind as its opening track, and then the original version of Girl from the North Country, and Masters of War, and Don't Think Twice, It's Alright, and A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. This was Dylan's protest period. It was him and a guitar, and that's possibly what pushes it down a little bit. If this was later in his career with a full band, this would be a phenomenal record. As it is, it's just merely great. My number 10. At number 9 is his last all-acoustic album until Good As I've Been to You, Another Side of Bob Dylan. He's stepping away now from traditional folk music stylings, and he's going to get, as we know, pilloried for it. This opens with All I Really Want to Do, which he kind of has a bit of a giggle partway through the recording of it. That indicates that he might be having a bit of a lighter time on this record than perhaps the previous three. That is almost set in stone by the time you reach Motorcycle Nightmare. That opens up side 2, which is just a bonkers piece. Ballad in Plain D is on here. We've also got My Back Pages, and it closes with It Ain't Me, Babe, my number 9. Number 8, the only other record that features the band, the Basement Tapes. So this came out in 1975, and the Bob Dylan stuff on here is good. What puts it at number 8 for me is the fact that I love the band tracks. So a lot of people criticise the fact that when Robbie Robertson put this together, there are something like 8 tracks on here that are only the band and Bob isn't on. Those are actually predominantly my favourites. And I enjoy listening to the Basement Tapes because of the band, not in spite of the band. The Bob stuff on here, it's fine. It's enjoyable enough, but it's the band that elevates it to number 8. And number 7, from 1989, a massive return to form. It's a comeback, effectively. His second comeback album, Oh Mercy. Produced by Daniel Lanois, and Ring Them Bells, Political World, Everything Is Broken. It's the album that everybody wanted Bob to make in the 80s, and he only just snuck it in. This album owes a debt to something else that I actually think is I enjoy a lot more, and that is Travelling Wilburys. The Travelling Wilburys thing in 1988 reinvigorated Bob Dylan, and as a result, I think it sparked him to better stuff again. Really good record at number 7. At number 6, 1967's John Wesley Harding, Dear Landlord. I really like that, and I Dreamed of St Augustine, and of course All Along the Watchtower, which on this album doesn't cast a shadow. What casts a shadow over the album is the Jimi Hendrix version, but on this album it just sits there perfectly happily in the middle of side 1. The Ballad of Frankie Lee and Judas Priest is a great little epic, and I'll Be Your Baby Tonight, and this is a really, really strong album. I've got a lot of fondness for John Wesley Harding. My number 6. And number 5, from 1979, Slow Train Coming. One of my all-time favourite Christian albums. Even Secular Music Press rates this highly. They give it 4 out of 5 stars. I think they do that because it's a Christian album. Because it's actually a 5-star album, in my opinion. Serve Somebody is just absolutely fantastic. Precious Angel is great. Man Gave Name to All the Animals is hilarious. I think this is a pretty spellbinding album, and if it weren't a Christian album, I think it would be given 5 stars, but because it is, I think they knock it down to 4. But for me, It is a 5-star record. I think Slow Train Coming is great. At number 4, Blonde on Blonde. So I've already intimated, and you come as no surprise if you've been listening, I'm not fond of fill up the whole side of vinyl with just one song. I don't actually like Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. But I do like the other 3 sides. So Just Like a Woman and Sooner or Later, One of Us Must Know, Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat, Stuck Inside a Moby with the Memphis Blues again. I am fond of Rainy Day Women, numbers 12 and 35. I do think that sides 1 and 2 comfortably outstrip sides 3 and of course 4. Could it have been pared down to a single album? Possibly. Maybe there's a future reimagined in that. My number 4, Blonde on Blonde. Number 3, I have placed Bringing It All Back Home from 1965. This is the debut of Electric Dylan, and side 1 is full band stuff. It opens with Subterranean Homesick Blues. It carries on with stuff like Maggie's Farm and Love Minus Zero, No Limit. And then side 2 is more acoustic stuff, which kind of might have been a bit of a sop to the old folkies that he was about to get seriously riled up by side A. So Mr. Tambourine Man and Gates of Eden, It's All Right Ma, I'm Only Bleeding, and It's All Over Now Baby Blue. Those 4 songs make up the whole of side 2, and there aren't many albums with a better side of music than Bringing It All Back Home. It's my number 3. Number 2, for a long time this was my favourite Dylan album, but it's sunk a little bit after listening to a podcast recently. It is Blood on the Tracks from 1975, very nearly released in the year I was born. This is going to be 50 years old next year. The opening 2 tracks of Simple Twist of Fate and Tangled Up in Blue are, again, worth the admission of the album. But then we also have Idiot Wind and You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go on side 1. Side 2, I don't think, maintains the standard of side 1. And despite the fact that, Dylan is consistently a semitone off key throughout, I rather like Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts. Buckets of Rain closes the album out, and Blood on the Tracks was the reason Basement Tapes was released is because Blood on the Tracks was a critical and commercial success. Because after Nashville Skyline didn't really set the world alight, Self-Portrait kind of sank the ship. New Morning, Planet Waves, and the soundtrack for Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid didn't really set the world alight. Blood on the Tracks was the success he needed again, and as a result he felt he could release the Basement Tapes. Blood on the Tracks, absolutely terrific album from 1975. Which leaves only one thing at number 1, and I think I've said this on previous videos. It is my favourite Dylan album after all. Highway 61 Revisited from 1965. First of all, this opens with Like a Rolling Stone, which is just a cracking song, but it's not the best thing on it. Tombstone Blues follows it up, which I think is fantastic. Ballad of a Thin Man, the song of Mr. Jones, is just... It gets cited in a Beatles track I don't like, by the way, Year Blues, but it's cited in there. It's a great record. Highway 61, the title track. Queen Jane Approximately, which no one ever seems to talk about, and I think is absolutely fantastic. Just like Tom Thumb Blues, which is amongst my favourite Dylan tracks, none of which are the best thing on it, because that is Desolation Row. Desolation Row is a phenomenally good song. That alone would get it a top 10 merit placing. The fact that it's got all the other tracks I mentioned on it as well means that Highway 61 Revisited is my favourite Dylan album. It's my number 1. So that concludes my top 20 Bob Dylan albums. Let me know in the comments below what you think, what your favourites are, maybe what your ranking is. I'll be back soon with another video, but until then, I'd remind you to subscribe, like, and hit the bell. Share the video, and thanks for watching.